Do you know what spin-off I want? 28 minutes later. That's what I want. I want to know what happened day one. I want second one. So I said, that scene of Robert Carlyle where he's just, as well, when he makes the most human decision ever, where he's like, fuck it, and just leaves his wife. Right? It's harsh as fuck.
Cowards out.
But can you blame him? So far away, Lucas, and lovely audience at home, same question. What is your favourite zombie movie?
Shaun of the Dead.
Yeah, I knew you'd say that. I was even going to try and make it more specific and say your favourite British zombie movie, but that's still Shaun of the Dead. We're not talking about Shaun of the Dead today. We're talking about 28 Days Later. And oddly enough, there is a connective thread between Shaun of the Dead and 28 Days Later. And have you watched Shaun of the Dead enough to know what I'm talking about here?
Oh, I thought you were going to talk about behind the scenes, because behind the scenes, Edgar Wright and Simon Pegg were quite annoyed that 28 Days Later came out, because they thought they were jumping on a pretty dead trend at the time.
Well, I don't know about that, but I do know that they put a swipe at 28 Days Later in Shaun of the Dead. And right at the end of the film, where Shaun's just flipping through the TV and you get those snippets of the news, you overhear one of the news reporters say, and reports that the zombie outbreak was caused by rage-infected monkeys has been dismissed as ridiculous.
Official claims that the virus was caused by rage-infected monkeys have now been dismissed as
Hello?
Yeah, and I can't remember 100%, you might have to double check, but I'm pretty sure it's Edgar Wright himself that voices that line.
It might be, so I'll double check that and we'll put the clip in. But either way, let's talk about 28 Days Later. And for anyone out there who's unfamiliar with the format of Wiki Weekends, it's a series where I, your host of this episode, Karl Smallwood, am joined by my ever-present co-host, Lucas Holland.
I'm always here.
Always. Even when he's not here, he's here. And I scour the lengths and breadths of the internet for a wiki on a subject I'm interested in and go through it to see what kind of conversation arises as a result. And the reason I like to talk about 28 Days Later is because in a couple of days I'm going to watch 28 Years Later.
And are you surprised that it wasn't just called 28 Weeks Later again and they just, pretended that movie never existed?
See, 28 Weeks Later, it has its issues. So we're probably going to talk about 28 Days Later and 28 Weeks Later. No spoilers for 28 Years Later, because as mentioned, I haven't seen it yet. But I do think it's a very interesting series. I don't think it's a very good zombie movie. And George Romero himself would agree with me here as the father of the modern day zombie genre. He's they run. My zombies don't run. Zombies don't run. And I believe he even quipped about it of what did they do when they died? Join a health club or something? Zombies don't run.
Zombies cannot run. I say this definitively, as the grandfather or the godfather of zombies. Zombies cannot run. So anyone who has a zombie running, don't listen to that person.
And to be fair, 28 Days Later and Weeks Later and Years Later, it's not zombies, it's rage-infected humans.
Yes, they're not zombies, but I do know that the person who created it was inspired by the zombie genre, as covered here in the wiki. So, 28 Days Later, sometimes stylized with ellipses as 28 Days Later ... is a 2002 post-apocalyptic horror film directed by Danny Boyle and written by Alex Garland. And they are two really interesting creators, both of whom have created things I'm fans of.
Yeah, both of them have a couple of mixed bag things in there, but generally their catalogue is excellent.
Yes, and the film stars Cillian Murphy as a bicycle courier who awakens from a coma to discover the accidental release of a highly contagious, aggression-inducing virus, which has caused the breakdown of society. And I'm going to say as well, did Walking Dead rip 28 Days Later off? Because Walking Dead has basically the same introduction as 28 Days Later, but 28 Days Later did it way fucking better. With just, the protagonist waking up in a hospital and walking through an apocalyptic, empty hellscape.
See, that's the thing, because I don't know how true that is to the comics and how early the comics are in terms of Walking Dead, so I'm not 100% sure, but they're very, very similar, and as you say, they just did it way better in 28 Days Later.
28 Days Later did it amazingly. They did it so well that they actually had to, lay it in the soundtrack earlier, because I'm a big fan of 28 Days Later, and I've watched a bunch of behind the scenes stuff about it. And according to the director, an early screening of the film, they had it in almost complete silence of Cillian Murphy walking through just an empty London, which was a ball ache for them to film. That's filmed at 4 a.m, I think, and shut down as much of London as they could, and then make it look like shit by throwing around loads of debris and tipping over cars, and then like when rush hour happened, they had to like tip all the cars back over and collect all the rubbish, only for pedestrians to walk down the road and throw all the rubbish out anyway.
Well, apparently the tipped bus was not allowed. Like, they didn't get permission for that, or they got told no.
And they did
and
it
they
anyway.
just did it in the morning before anyone noticed. And was like, fuck.
It's 4 a.m, who gives a shit? And apparently there was an early version of that scene with no music whatsoever. And do you know where Cillian Murphy like backs into the car and sets the alarm off?
Oh, was that just like an actual accident?
It wasn't an accident, but in an early version of the film without the music building throughout that scene, that was like the first bit of noise you heard in like 5 minutes. And apparently the audience just shit themselves too much that they had to go and like layer in the soundtrack that builds throughout the scene so that it wasn't as jarring as it was. Because they said once we'd done that, the audience didn't trust us, and we needed the audience to trust us.
And it is an excellently harrowing scene, because if anyone's familiar with, capital cities like London and how bustling and busy they are at almost any time in the day, seeing London completely abandoned is harrowing,
yes.
Right?
And I do like as well that you as an audience, before you know it's like, oh, it's a zombie movie, or it's inspired by zombie movies, you're in the same boat as Cillian Murphy of like, the fuck is going on? I love that he just wanders around and it's like, for example, he just sees like the upturned security truck and he just starts picking up money on the ground and chucking it in a carrier bag.
Yeah.
And you find yourself thinking, why would someone leave money on the ground like that? And it's, because the shit that happened was so bad, people just left the money behind.
Even if London was completely dead, that would be your instinct, right? It's like, don't question things. If there's free money on the ground, just take the free money.
Exactly, yeah. And Cillian Murphy's character is, like, bemused more than anything. It's more just, is this real? And it's only when they realise the extent to which London is devoid of life, at least that they can see, that their expression and, like, demeanour starts to shift from confused to worried to terrified.
And it is very well done and executed so well, where you in London just long enough to believe, oh god, this place is fucking abandoned, but then they swiftly move out into the countryside where they can film properly,
where they
right?
could actually film properly, yes. So Garland took inspiration from George A. Romero's Night of the Living Dead film series. So it was inspired by George Romero's zombie movies, but it's Garland's own twist on it. It was also inspired by John Wyndham's 1951 novel The Day of the Triffids. Presumably not the film, because the film is widely regarded as one of the worst films ever made, because the Triffids are walking tomato plants, or at least they are in the movie. And they are widely considered to be the most non-threatening movie monster the movie tries to portray as threatening, because you just have these fucking walking plants like lumbering around like dipshits that everyone's terrified of for some reason.
The Day of the Triffids. It started when the Earth passed through a storm of meteorites that transformed a strange breed of carnivorous plants known as Triffids into flesh-eating, man-killing monsters.
I'll put a clip in
tomato
of the Triffids.
plants.
Yes. Well, they look like tomato plants. Like, you've not seen the Triffids? So there's
I
like
don't think
classic
so.
bad horror movies. The book, to my knowledge, is far more adept at getting across the threats that the Triffids represent, but that's what they look like in the movie.
Jesus fucking Christ, that's not good.
Yeah, they're not scary, are they?
That's like a fucking 1970s Doctor Who villain of the week, right?
Yeah. But, like, presumably the book is a bit scarier, because that's what Alex Garland was inspired by.
Paris, paralyzed by shock. London, stricken by fearsome disaster. And on all sides, Triffids.
28 days later, it was released on the 1st of November 2002 in the UK and the 27th of June 2003 in the US to generally positive reviews and commercial success.
Ah yes, when Channel 4 actually funded independent film.
It was indeed, yes. Filming took place in various locations across the United Kingdom in 2001. The crew filmed brief periods during early morning and temporarily closed streets to capture recognisable and typically busy areas when they were deserted. And there's a handful of films that have managed to do that. I think of Vanilla Sky, where Vanilla Sky managed to shut down Times Square so Tom Cruise could go for a job.
Shit.
And I am all in on the theory that Tom Cruise only did that to see how famous he was.
Maybe was he that famous when Vanilla Sky came out? I don't know, like, the trajectory of the timeline.
That was like the peak of Mr. Box Office Dynamite. And there's like a long-running theory that Tom Cruise insisted on shutting down Times Square just to see if he was famous enough to shut down Times Square.
And one that I'm familiar with, it's from Alice in Borderland. I don't know, like, how they achieved the effect, whether they actually got it shut down or whatnot, but they had an abandoned Shibuya crossing in Tokyo.
報道というものは通常撮影で使えないことになってるんですけどね、そういったところで撮影需要っていうのも高いものですから、撮影する側にとっても見る側にとっても本物のようなこういった行動を使っての撮影っていうのはリアル感がすごいので、こういった大きい本物の行動に似せたような交差点を使っての撮影ができるという。
Resident Evil also did that, but they filmed that shit on a soundstage, and you can really tell it's on a soundstage.
Like, that's the thing. I don't know if Alice in Borderland, like, ever shut down anything. I imagine it's probably, again, similar, they just CG'd it, or did it all on a soundstage and stuff, but it looked pretty good, as far as I remember when I was watching it, yeah.
But we continue now with the intro. Despite Boyle not considering 28 Days Later to be a zombie film, it is credited with reinvigorating the genre and influencing a revival a decade after its release, with fast-running infected and character-driven drama. So even though Danny Boyle himself's like it's not a zombie movie, it did reinvigorate the zombie genre, which is why I feel comfortable referring to it as a zombie movie. So it's not a zombie movie, so at the very least it's zombie adjacent, right?
Yeah, I think if you ask the average person what is 28 Days Later, they'd probably just call it a zombie film. Even if you're asking someone like, you know, yourself or I, like, just... We know that it's not zombies, but you still just refer to it as, like, a zombie film because it's close to the similar idea, right?
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of the zombie movie genre, but I'm not that much of an arsehole where I'd correct someone for calling 28 Days Later a zombie movie, which is why I'm referring to it as such, just for the sake of simplicity.
I was about to say if it walks and talks like a zombie, they don't. But they are essentially undead people going around, living forever, murdering everybody else.
Well, that's the thing about the rage monsters. They're not actually dead. They're alive, and the scary thing about them is that they're fully aware of what they're doing. That's what makes them scary, because somewhere inside of all of the rage monsters is a person. And you see that with Joe, the dad, who gets like the blood drop in his eye.
Yeah,
and you see it infect him, and you have that like harrowing moment where like he looks at his daughter and says, "Get away."
What?
Keep away from me. Stay where you are.
Dad?
Keep away from me!
Dad?
Keep away from me! Keep away from me! Keep away! Away!
And just as he's on the cusp of being overtaken by the virus, he like aggressively pushes away and just screams like, "Get away! Get away! Get away!" And that's like just his last fucking moment of like having control of his body. And you see him turn to the group, and you can still see like the sadness in his eyes.
I love you very much.
What?
Keep away from me. Stay where you are.
Dad?
Because he knows that he's about to attack like his daughter, but he can't stop his body. And it's an amazing bit of acting. It makes the monsters scarier.
Jenny's infected!
But I assume at some point they're not alive anymore because, like, 28 weeks and years later exist, and presumably those people are still around, so at some point they must become undead.
I'm unsure, because...
I'm unsure too.
I'm imagining that 28 years later he's going to delve into it, because Cillian Murphy is in it. And I don't consider that to be a spoiler, because he's on the fucking poster. Like, the poster for the movie is like the really emaciated, infected. That's Cillian Murphy. And presumably it's going to like delve into like what the fuck happened to him.
Yeah, and you know, it's a very British way of making movies, right? He doesn't just like live a happy life. It's not just sunshine and rainbows.
Well, that's the thing. Are you familiar with the proposed alternate ending to 28 Days Later?
You may have mentioned it to me at some point, but go ahead.
You know what, we'll get into that when we reach it in the wiki, but we'll move on now, Lucas, to production. So early influences on writer Alex Garland included George Romero's Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead, which he loved as a child. He claimed to have largely forgotten about the zombie genre until he played the game Resident Evil.
And That literally means Resident Evil and Resident Evil 2 can be credited for an entire revival of the zombie genre in film.
That was too close. You were almost a Jill sandwich.
You're right. Barry, thanks for saving my life.
It is, and why is that, Lucas? Because I know you know the facts here, but why is it that Resident Evil 2 specifically can be credited with helping revive the zombie genre?
Because Resident Evil 2 inspired a scene in Spaced, which then they decided to extend the idea of to make Shaun of the Dead. And
You want a piece of me? Come get some.
between 28 Days Later and Shaun of the Dead, that was pretty much the zombie genre reviving itself, right?
Yes, and it's worth noting at the same time, George Romero, the father of the genre itself, also made, like, I think he did Diary of the Dead around that time, which kind of fucking sucks, but...
But does anyone talk about that film?
No, and then you had the Zack Snyder Dawn of the Dead reboot, which is probably his best movie.
I think that was a few years later, though.
Maybe, because I know that... and for anyone curious, like, why do you keep saying George Romero is the father of a zombie genre? Right? Zombies were a thing before George Romero. Yes, they were, but the term zombie largely referred to voodoo zombies from like Haitian folklore and stuff like that. The idea of a zombie, as people understand it today, a body reanimated somehow that just seeks to propagate itself by biting and attacking the living, that idea is credited to George Romero.
And I do have to correct myself, Shaun and Dawn of the Dead reboot both came out in 2004, so 2/3 of the zombie revival can maybe be associated with Resident Evil very specifically.
Okay, so that Zack Snyder's Dawn of the Dead, yes, came out in 2004.
Yes, yeah.
And 28 Days Later came out first. Like, good for Alex Garland. He got in there first.
Yeah, that's why you play Resident Evil 1 and not 2.
I guess it makes sense, right? Like, Shaun of the Dead was inspired by the sequel, so it came out a few years later. And to get back to George Romero for a moment, as mentioned, he's considered to be the father of the genre, and there is the term Romero zombies, which is largely used to refer to zombies, whether or not they're from his movies, that adhere to the rules as established in his movies. And there are a couple of basic Romero zombie rules that zombies have to follow. They don't have to, but if you want it to be like, you know, a zombie movie proper, they have to adhere to the rules of Romero zombies, otherwise, like, they're kind of like an offshoot of his creation, because as mentioned, even though zombies were a thing, his take on zombies was so unique, they're considered to be a unique creation unto themselves, to the point where George Romero didn't even consider the creatures in Night of the Living Dead to be zombies, because he was aware of like Haitian voodoo zombies. He actually thought they were vampires, and he based like his monsters in that movie on what's it now? I Am Legend.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And I keep saying, no, my guys aren't vampires. They certainly aren't vampires. They're not even zombies. Zombies, to me, were, you know, those boys in the Caribbean.
And it was only when fans started referring to the creatures in Dawn of the Dead as zombies that he himself adopted the term.
And I thought they were completely new. What I really was saying, which I didn't articulate until the second film, was when there's no more room in hell, the dead will walk the earth. And that was actually the tagline for the second film, when I finally gave up and decided to call them zombies.
That's fair, yeah. And it is pretty much just, if you think of what we would all assume is a zombie, that is going to be the characteristics that George Romero created for his zombies.
And you're no doubt familiar with the basic rules of Romero zombies, right, Lucas? Just from the many different incarnations that have appeared in all the countless bits of media you've played and interacted with.
That's the thing is, they're so ingratiated in like pop culture that I don't know what the technical rules would be. If I was to guess, it would be that, you know, they're undead, they are slow, they lack intelligence. If you get bitten, you become one of them. That kind of thing.
Well, they're not so much rules as they are guidelines, and fans of the genre, like myself, consider to be just a couple of hallmarks of Romero zombies that make them Romero zombies. One is that, you know, they don't run. They are undead. Their origins are never explained. That's one of the most important things, that the origins of the zombie outbreak is never established. You can hint to it, you can have characters theorise what it may be, but you are never allowed to outright confirm it.
I felt that it didn't matter at all. What should matter is that this extraordinary thing is happening, and people are still arguing about upstairs, downstairs, who's the boss. They're still arguing about their own agendas.
Because that would ruin the ambiguity of what they represent. And that's one of the other rules, is that the zombies are a metaphor. What that metaphor is widely open to interpretation.
It's normally dependent on the message you want to make with your media, right?
And George Romero himself would talk about in interviews how the zombies in his movies have represented everything from rampant consumerism to post 9/11 America.
Whoa.
They're a very...
Consumerism, Karl? How could that happen?
Yeah, just shambolic corpses who are driven by a singular desire to feed, being inexplicably drawn towards a shopping mall.
That could hold no message behind it, Karl.
They are a very malleable concept.
You're still here.
They're after us. They know we're still in here. They're after the place. They don't know why. They just remember that they want to be in here.
They really are, yeah. And, we talk about different franchises that have used them, like something like Resident Evil. Like, Resident Evil uses zombies in very different ways and ultimately no longer uses zombies proper, but it started out that way, and it uses them in a very different way than George Romero does, and in a very different way than Shaun of the Dead uses them, right?
And the zombies in Shaun of the Dead are about as close to the Romero zombies as you're going to get, because Edgar Wright and Simon Pegg are huge fans of Romero's work, and as a result, were absolutely dead set on adhering to every rule was established in his movies.
Yeah, in terms of the actual zombies, they are just plucked out of a Romero film. Like, to the point where we've talked about it in previous videos, like, they put Romero references in their movie.
They put in so many Romero references, some of which were so obscure, George Romero himself didn't get them.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
Stop it!
Listen, Mum, sit tight, okay? You're not safe there. We're coming over.
I don't want to cause a fuss.
We're coming to get you, Barbara!
I think one of my favourite moments in Shaun of the Dead is the bit where they're trying to learn how to become zombies themselves, and Shaun is, giving them the little training camp, and they're all so just bad in different ways.
Come on. Okay, it's mournful, sorrowful, you dead and you hate it. Go. Much better.
That scene has one thing Edgar Wright is fantastic at is his utilisation of the Chekhov's gun. And Chekhov's gun, people don't know, it's like a rule in writing where if you introduce a gun at the start of a play or a story, by the end of the story that gun needs to be used. And Shaun of the Dead literally has that in the fucking Winchester rifle above the barrel of Winchester. But they have countless examples of that trope in action.
We're going to borrow your car, okay? We'll bring it back. And if you're feeling better later, we'll go to the pub. So you're more than welcome to join us.
Johnny, look who it is! Fuck-a-doodle-doo!
And the one that I didn't notice until I think my most recent rewatch is during that scene. They're going across all the people trapped by zombies, and Shaun gives his example. Ed does a bad one. The actor girl really tries to encourage everyone to do their best. They go to his mum, who's not paying attention, and say, "Oh, that's a really good impression of a zombie," and that's after she got bit.
Liz. Nice, good vocal work. Okay, Barbara, that's excellent. Sorry, dear, I was miles away.
And I never clocked that.
Of course it is.
I never clocked that until my most recent. Of course, that's it's the suggestion that she was bit. It's like, oh, you're doing a great
impression. She's not a zombie yet, but that's the little hint. Oh yeah, of course.
Because she stood there completely spaced out. It's like, great, what a great impression of a zombie. And she's like, what? Miles away.
But then the actual zombie impression that she does, where she's just like, ooh. It's great. She just becomes a little ghost shambling down the street.
And that's another great example of Shaun of the Dead adhering to the rules of Romero Zombies, that it's ambiguous whether or not there's still humanity left inside the zombie.
Yeah.
And they have that multiple times, don't they? Of like, that man in there, that's not your husband. It's a monster. Turns off the radio. Where he looks at his mum's eyes and she has like the mum look. But then she has the completely dead eyes, and then she goes like, rare, and gets him.
Yeah, and it's just like, even at the end, right, where they've got people like chained up and shit, like they've got Ed in the shed, and he's just sat there playing Time Splitters, but when Shaun walks in, he does try to get him for a minute, but then he's like, but Time Splitters though.
Yeah, and like, no, that's something that's dealt with in Romero's movies, right, with the Dawn of the Dead. All the zombies going towards the mall. It's never outright confirmed, but the characters in the film do theorise, well, maybe they just sense that they want to be here, and that's why they keep coming here. Or maybe they just know that we're inside.
Is that now like a kind of defunct point because people don't congregate at shopping malls very much anymore?
If Romero was alive today, he would have made a fucking terrible zombie movie inspired by COVID-19, but I'd have still watched it. Like, let's be honest, he kind of lost his touch towards the end there. I'd have still fucking watched it. Like, Diary of the Dead might be one of the most on-the-nose, I'm making a point movies. It feels like it was made by college students trying to ape Romero, not Romero himself. And the fact that the characters in the film are college students making a documentary makes me think, did he know how cringy and on the nose it was?
Yeah, it's like the first attempt at putting meaning behind your film, right?
Yeah, like where you have like the lady narrator talking about, like, right at the end, filming the scene of like the rednecks hanging the zombie and shooting out with shotguns, of like, who are the real monsters? Us or them? It's like, Romero, you dealt with this 40 fucking years ago.
It's interesting how quickly we find out what we're capable of becoming. Up until that night, we had lived predictable lives. Now, we would never be able to predict what might happen next.
That film is made by a person that's only just learned what the word metaphor means.
Even though it was made by Romero, and it's actually thing, like, did he know? He probably did, right? He must have done. Either way, right. Development. Early influences mentioned were Night of the Living Dead and Resident Evil, which reminded him of how much he loved zombies. Director Danny Boyle liked Garland's screenplay and proposed a zombie film, having directed the 2000 film adaptation of Garland's novel, The Beach.
As much as I don't know whether it's actually going to happen, Alex Garland is apparently going to be behind the Elden Ring film.
You know what? Fucking let him do it.
Alex Garland is like a proper gamer. He's talking in interviews about how he's on like his 7th build run of Elden Ring, of like, I just keep going back to it and like trying out different builds, and it's fucking great and I can't stop playing it.
In regards to the budget, producer Andrew McDonald had access to funding from the National Lottery. So for Americans, over here, the National Lottery funds like a bunch of community projects, like the arts.
I did think that this was a Film 4 funded thing.
Partially. There was a lot.
Right,
that was one source of funding. They pitched it to Universal Pictures, who declined to support it. Budget constraints continue to be an issue throughout production, with Christopher Eccleston having to take an emergency pay cut.
Oh shit, okay, fair enough. I mean, like, there's not many stories you hear of actors willing to take the pay cut so the project can continue, right?
Casting. On the DVD commentary, Boyle explains that with the aim of preserving a suspension of disbelief, they sought to cast relatively unknown actors. Cillian Murphy had starred primarily in small independent films, while Naomi Harris had acted on British television as a child, whilst Megan Burns had one previous film credit. However, Christopher Eccleston and Brendan Gleeson were well-known character actors at the time.
Yeah.
Here's a fun fact. Cillian Murphy originally auditioned for the role with a standard Southern British accent, as Jim was written to be English. However, during filming, Boyle and Murphy decided to revert to the actor's natural accent and rewrote the character to be Irish.
I don't know, it just, as much as I say on one hand it would be weird to hear him in like that RP British accent, it's like, but he's also in Peaky Blinders and he pulls that off flawlessly, so...
One thing I always respect about Cillian Murphy is how much he fucking hates English people.
Oh, I mean, he's Irish, right? It's valid.
One of my favourite stories about an actor is that Cillian Murphy moved away from London back to Ireland, and they asked him why. He went, I heard my kids started to develop an English accent and thought, fuck that. and move back to Ireland so they have an Irish accent instead.
That's 100% valid, yeah.
Here's a little detail, Lucas. James McAvoy auditioned for a role as an infected.
Oh, not even for like the main role?
I love when there's like those big name actors who like, what's their earliest credit? And it's James McAvoy, infected 28 days later.
But bear in mind that at that time, he probably hadn't even been on Shameless yet.
Nope. It was just...
Like, James McAvoy was a complete unknown probably at that point.
As were a lot of the other people in it.
Yeah.
Like Cillian Murphy. It's what put him on the map, really, right? Because it's just how good his performance was.
Yeah, this was his big breakout hit, right? Or as close to a big breakout hit as it can be. I don't know how massive 28 Days Later was, but it's big enough to get 2 sequels.
Yeah. And I'm really looking forward to like 28 years later. I know it came out like 23 years ago, but I presume it's going to do a time skip. Say, fuck it, it's 5 years in the future. Whatever.
Yeah, it would have been interesting if they actually committed to making it 28 years after the original film, but do we really want to wait 5 more years?
That's the thing, like, it's been 20 years, so you can just fudge it a little bit, right?
Yeah, and I am confused because there's meant to be more projects. I'm like, are we doing 28 decades later? What's going on after this?
Well, there is like a graphic novel that was really interesting. I'll put clips of it in because I think on the DVD, which I distinctly recall owning when I was younger, it'd be gone now, but like they had like a motion comic about like various other people who had Jim's experience of like what happened to them when they woke up.
When this thing first started, I didn't have any guns. Then I came across the military blockades that got overrun. Best stock up to deal with that wannabe SAS prick.
And I'll try and put a clip in of that if I can find it anywhere. But I would recommend people go seek out, like, a Blu-ray copy of this film if they can, because it presumably will have those extras on there.
Yeah, and I'm assuming at this point, like, years is as far as they can take it, and it's just going to be 28 years later subtitles. But I'm kind of interested in the concept of, fuck it, let's turn this series sci-fi and go 28 decades later. Let's find out.
What I'd be interested in is more examples of just what happened right at the start. Because one of the best things in zombie movies is like the first 20 minutes when you get to see the world just collapse.
Get back, Anna. Get back!
Jesus, just tell me what's going on.
I told you to get back.
And the way 28 Days Later opens is really good. I love the shot of him walking through like a completely desolate London. But I will give 28 Weeks Later credit for the scene with Robert Carlyle right at the beginning of, okay, this is day 1 of the infection. The fuck is going on? And it's just him hauling the most ass I've ever seen anyone haul.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, I'd rather see 28 Days Later spin-offs than 28 Years Later spin-offs.
Do you know what spin-off I want? 28 Minutes Later. That's what I want. I want to know what happened day 1. I want second 1. So it's like that scene of Robert Carlyle where he's just, as well, when he makes the most human decision ever, where it's like, fuck it, and just leaves his wife. Right? It's harsh as fuck.
Cowards out.
But can you blame him?
Dawn! Help us!
No, of course, instinct kicks in at that point, and most people probably would do that, but it's still fun to just call him a fucking coward.
And I will give like big props to like one of the most harrowing visuals from a horror movie of him running his ass off, and you just see the hill in the background, the infected coming over, and they just keep pouring over that hill, and they're running so fast.
And it is interesting in terms of like an apocalypse kind of vibe, because I always question when an apocalypse takes place on an island, because that's an isolated event. Like, you can keep the rest of the world completely safe.
Yeah, in 28 Weeks Later, they say, oh yeah, France immediately shut the fucking borders and doesn't let anyone across. And the ending of 28 Weeks Later, if you recall, is like just that one shot of the Eurotunnel and just an infected running through it.
Right, yeah, of course. But, like, still, you could just have a couple of armed guards at the tunnel, right? Like,
yeah, you can, for a couple of them, but what happens when an entire country's population sprints at the same time towards one goal? You only got so many bullets.
Well, if that happened, But, yeah, like, realistically, you could just block up the tunnel.
The idea that they don't bomb the tunnel second one is ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah, it's insane, because other than that €1 tunnel, there is no way to get out without being on, like, a fucking boat or a plane or something. At that point, you're already infected. Like, you're not going to pilot a plane.
Yeah. And they can't swim.
Yeah.
That's like another
Exactly.
common trend in a lot of zombie movies, where isn't it of like, oh, the infection can't go across water. It's like, well, it could, it's just that zombies can't fucking swim.
Yeah, like, if they were persistent enough, they could.
But, we'll get to filming now, Lucas. So the film features scenes set in normally bustling parts of London, such as Westminster Bridge, Piccadilly Circus, Horse Guards Parade, and Oxford Street. To depict these locations as desolate, the crew closed off sections of street for minutes at a time, usually on a Sunday morning, and typically had only 45 minutes after dawn to shoot locations devoid of members of the public and traffic.
What a ball ache.
Ball ache. Do you know how much of a ball ache it was? For the London scene in which Jim walks past an overturned double-decker bus, you mentioned this earlier, Lucas, the film crew placed the bus on its side and removed it when the shot was finished, all within 20 minutes.
Yeah, and as I mentioned earlier, I think they literally were denied permission and just did it themselves.
Yes. When the crew asked Westminster City Council for permission to place the bus outside of Downing Street, this was denied. However, when they arrived at 4 a.m. and nobody from the council was present, they put the bus there anyway.
Like, talk about guerrilla filmmaking, right? Of, fuck it, we just threw a bus down the street and then cleaned it up afterwards.
It only took 20 minutes, right?
Yeah.
And the production team hired an optometrist to supervise with the red contact lenses needed for cast members playing the infected. And that's the thing. The infected aren't zombies. They're an entirely different beast. And they're scary for different reasons. And just the fact that they just run so fucking fast is scary for a different reason to zombies. Zombies are scary because they're a pervasive, persistent threat that never tires. Yes, they're slow-moving and lumbering, but the fact they will never get tired and they are a constant background threat it's the existential dread of you will never truly be rid of them. Whereas the infected in this, it's not so much that, it's just terror of like you make one mistake and then suddenly just the entire city just begins to swarm with the infected.
Put it up! Almost! Get the car on! Right! Get it on! Hannah, come on!
As well, they don't appear, as far as I remember, to have much, like, in terms of stamina. They just seemingly go forever.
Yeah, which is the rage virus just, like, overloads them with adrenaline.
Yeah, yeah.
And one of my favourite scenes in the film is towards the end where Jim just goes on his fucking rampage. And he just beats all the soldiers to death with his bare hands. And you have that moment where he's, like, caving the soldier's skull in and, like, puts his thumbs into his eyes. And I think it's Hannah looks at him and for a second thinks he's infected. Because in that moment she can't tell the difference between an infected and someone who's just real fucking pissed.
Which realistically basically is all it is, right? Is like the virus being called rage is very apt in just the sense of it just makes people seem really fucking angry.
Yeah. If anyone's curious, that's what the rage virus basically is. It just causes an overload of adrenaline, which just completely overrides every other base impulse that you have and causes you to just violently lash out at everything in your surroundings.
I don't want to bring too much attention to it, but it's very harrowing the way that they kind of make the virus, so to speak, of just like the fucking chimp torture, right?
Rage monkeys, yeah.
Yeah.
And we'll move now swiftly on, Lucas, to alternate endings and audience response. So, at a certain point, McDonald announced to the crew that production had run out of money, and filming ceased without a satisfactory closing sequence having been shot. This resulted in several pitches for different endings, with the original ending, which featured Jim's death, having tested badly with audiences. As a result, the studio granted more funding to shoot the ending that was eventually used.
That's got to be rough, being on set and just like, right, that's it, everyone. We've got nothing left.
They just look expectantly at Christopher Eccleston. Like, you got any more money?
Do you want to take 1-0 off that paycheck, mate?
Here's a fun one, though. The crew arranged for a real jet to fly overhead for the film. You know, the ending where they see a jet in the sky and realise, oh, there's still people out there, maybe on another country, so the world's not completely fucked. That was a real jet because it was cheaper than getting a computer-generated one.
What?
It was cheaper to arrange for a real jet to fly overhead.
What the... Like, obviously this is 2002, but, like, that's insane.
Yeah. And now we have Lucas alternative endings. So, the DVD extras include 3 alternative endings, all of which conclude with Jim dying. Only one of these was filmed, which involved Jim dying of his gunshot wounds.
Hannah, we can do this. I don't know what these are. Salbutamol. Come on, Jim. Adrenaline.
Yeah. In another, which was scripted and storyboarded but not filmed, Jim dreams of the accident that left him in a coma as he dies from his gunshot wounds. The third, more radical departure was presented only in storyboards. Instead of Frank being killed by soldiers after being infected, the other survivors tie him up and discover a research laboratory at the blockade where Jim undergoes a blood transfusion in order to save Frank. And I think Danny Boyle talked about, yeah, that was so fucking stupid, because we talked to a scientist and that's not how blood works. Like, you can't just take someone's blood out, it's not an oil change.
And that was the problem right there with this ending. We'd established that one drop in the eye will infect someone, then how the flying fuck are we going to sell the idea that this blood transfusion idea is going to work? What do you do, clean out every capillary and vein with bleach before making the transfusion? Whatever, the way it would continue from here is that next we'd get an infected attack just to liven things up.
Oh dear, at least that one only made it to storyboards, but they were fucking desperate to kill Jim.
Yeah, the US cinematic release included one of the alternative endings after the film's credits in response to online debates over whether or not it was a more appropriate ending and conclusion to the story than the official one.
That must be a weird experience, watching the movie, the credits roll, and then there's a stinger of a different ending. Just to make a point? That's weird. He survived that film, but then he didn't survive the apocalypse.
And the way that he survived is by becoming the very monster he's trying to escape, which is very fitting for a movie that is, if not part of the zombie genre, heavily inspired by it, where the real question asked in a lot of zombie media is, who's the real monster? Is it the things acting on instinct, or is it us?
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, as you say, he doesn't literally become the infected, but he becomes so close to it that it's like, you know, questionable.
The fact
right?
he's indistinguishable from the same monsters they're shooting and gunning down is very deliberate. And is it the Left 4 Dead series where they acknowledge and make fun of the trope of like who's the real monster? Where they have like graffiti on a wall of like who are the real monsters in this scenario, and then it's a bunch of like graffiti response of like it's the monsters, dickhead, not us. Which I feel like just sums up online discourse about movies and stuff, right? You try to just engage with media on anything more than a completely surface level, and people are like, no, that's stupid. The real monsters are the monsters.
Never forget when we literally said that in The Walking Dead, the people are the Walking Dead, and used a screenshot from the comic where Rick says that, and people in the comments immediately go, nope, false, you're wrong.
Yeah. The Walking Dead, as a title, has multiple readings. It can refer to the literal Walking Dead present in the series, but also to all of the characters. To the point where, as Lucas mentioned, there is a moment in the comics and the TV show where Rick sits there and reveals to the group, we're all infected, we're all going to die and turn into those things. We are the Walking Dead. And we mentioned that in a video once, and even with a literal screenshot from the comics of that exact thing happening, we still got a bunch of comments, people like, no, the Walking Dead refers to the zombies.
It's like, yes, it does, but it also refers to... It's like, you just can't have the conversation, right?
It has multiple meanings. No, things can't mean two things.
Karl, the curtains, they're just blue, okay?
The curtains are blue. I can't even do it. I can't even jokingly do it because it'll piss me off too much. We've got more recording to do today. Thanks for watching. If you'd like to continue talking about this topic, no spoilers for 28 years later, because it's not been out that long yet, go down to the comments of the Discord found, link below. Otherwise, cheers for watching. I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.
Karl, it's the start of a new month, and of course that means it's time for a new shout-out for the end of the month, and this month, Karl, it's Wrath Month.
And for anyone out there unfamiliar with the concept of Wrath Month, it's something I came up with, and the idea is you find all those companies and people who adopted and used Pride imagery to sell their product and or service, and then you get real angry with them for not doing stuff to help out the queer community. So let us know in the comments where you think gay rage should be directed towards. Who deserves the gay rage the most? Who's not done it? Who's not helped?
Where do we take the energy from Pride Month and direct our rage at? Which, admittedly, this year has been less because they're all fucking cowards.
Yes, like, who is going to be our gay Goku that we're going to direct all of our gay energy into to give them, like, ultra gay instinct?
Either way, it's time to shout out everybody that made this happen for this month and kept all of the lights and mics on, so to speak. And Karl, I believe you have the first shout out, so go ahead.
Oh, also as well, I'd like to remind everyone out there that we have a standing offer, a challenge, dare I say, to our audience at home to come up with the hardest to pronounce words they can think of for their name over on Patreon. And boy, have people taken us up on that. They've taken that gauntlet, picked it up, shat in it, and slapped it across the face.
It's gonna get to a point where, like, none of these shout outs are in English anymore. It's getting there.
I'm waiting for someone to just put asterisk the sound of anguish screaming.
Well, I'll get to one later where, yeah, there's a literal non-language part in one of the shout-outs today.
And the first person we have to shout out is Tinakui Horchata Otiklane Tommy. And I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. They've mentioned here that it is in the language of Nahuatl. And I'm unfamiliar with that language, so let me know how I did.
That sounds highly offensive. Does it, white man? No.
Yeah, it literally says in the patron name, like, you said a different language, so let's try it. Let's go. And then the next person we have to shout out is Carlo Palochico, which says, it's Spanish for Karl Smallwood.
It feels like I should have shouted that one out, right?
I feel like it's more natural for me to say it because I introduce you so often, right?
Yeah, Carlo Palochico. I always thought Spanish for wood is Madeira. Am I getting that wrong?
Maybe it changes because it's like, you know, the affix of like small suffix. I don't know. Yeah.
Either way, the next person we have to shout out is someone who's left us a tongue twister here. So, the Boludos Bajando, Baja Blast, Buffing Bacas de Caca de Buffalo, Bombonado, Bolodeses, Bucanado, a Boca, Bailando con Barbosa.
And as far as I can tell from the emojis and that, I believe that's like a fire dragon or flaming dragon.
I believe so, yes, but I don't know how to pronounce emojis out loud.
No.
How did Egyptians do it? I don't know.
Just bring out the hieroglyphics.
Alright, read me back what I have so far, Mrs. Cleopatra.
Bird, giant eye, pyramid, bird.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Giant eye, dead fish, cat head, guy doing this.
But then the next person we have to shout out is a little bit easier. It's Roslindis Memphis. I kind of got away with that one a little bit there.
I am the man with no name.
Roslindis Memphis.
At your service.
You have indeed, mon frere. And the next one is Bar Weep, Grana Weep, Ninny Bong.
Yep, I don't even know what that is, other than some kind of bong, but yeah, I don't want to get into the other words. But anyway.
Do you know what it feels like? It feels like one of those things you put down as a pub quiz name that sounds rude when it's read aloud. Like, you know, like whale, oil, beef, hooked. Well, oil, be fucked. Right?
Fair. Yeah, or everybody's favourite MP, Mike, with the last name Hunt.
Yes, Mike Hunt.
Fuck's sake, I was trying to get past the censorship barriers, Karl. But anyway, the next person we have to shout out is Kicking Bucket with a little bucket emoji afterwards.
I guess that's how you pronounce the emoji. You just describe what you see. You're playing catchphrase now. Just say what you see. A bucket emoji. You win £5.
No, because Karl, if it was catchphrase, it'd be like, you absolute fool. It's singing in the rain. It's oh yeah, of course.
Yeah. Snake Charmer.
Oh god, that's the best one.
It'll never be topped.
Yeah.
It will never be topped.
5 seconds. Here we go. Shaun, you're gonna have to speak to her, run out of time.
I've no idea, sorry.
You've no idea, you don't.
And next we have Lucille Distille, which is such a powerful sounding name. It makes my name sound like crap, right? We've got Smallwood Distille.
Yeah, it reminds me of just like... I don't know why I haven't made the connection yet, but I wonder if it's a One Piece reference, because there's like the kind of the lore of D, as they say, or I think it's like the lore of D or the will of D. It's the will of D, right? But Karl knows a lot about the will of D.
No, I know Lord of D.
Oh yeah, the Lord of D, of course.
Do you remember like that one time we were all drunk on group chat, just sending in Yu-Gi-Oh cards that could be a stand-in for the name for your penis, and I just like won with Lord of D. But then our mate sent in just like Lord of Legendary D.
I definitely do not acknowledge that this ever happened and have no memory of it. But the next person to shout out, Karl, is where the lack of language comes into it, because we are supported by the lovely Bee of Awesome, and then insert... Because I got told to interpretive dance a hive of bees.
Oh, I'm waiting for someone to be like, okay, and now just read out the entire Bible. And it's like, well, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth.
The only thing I can think of when I think of a hive of bees is playing Zelda Breath of the Wild or like Metal Gear Solid 3 and like shoot down the beehive and the bees just attack. No.
All I think is just that one episode of The Simpsons where Apu thinks he's a hummingbird and goes, "Zoom." Which is similar, right? Hummingbirds like only a little bit bigger than a bee. But next we shout out Lam de Llama.
Of course, I always have to just shout out the llama face. That's the thing. It's just I can't get around just the Emperor's New Groove. Like it's the top tier of llamas.
It is, except for like llamas with hats, which I gotta shout out because it's like Karl. You know what? Funny every time.
Is it? Is it?
No.
Karl, that kills people!
And then next we have to shout out Little Ghost, who has got little ghost emojis either side of the name, which just, of course, reminds me of, like, the Gotenks attack where they blow out all the little Gotenks ghosts, right?
Is it ever established how Gotenks does that?
You know what?
Does anyone else in Dragon Ball have the ability to create an energy attack that has sentience?
Yes, I believe they all do, but Gotenks is the only one who's a child and willing to use their imagination with their ki.
That's me!
Okay, because I know like Goku can like steer his ki and Krillin can steer his ki with like the spread shot, but why does Gotenks' like energy blasts talk?
Yeah,
right?
like,
that seems like a super broken ability that no one else uses.
Summoning many ghosts that can literally shit talk their opponent.
Yeah, like Super Ghost Kamikaze attack. And speaking of which, you got a favourite like Dragon Ball attack name? Because I don't think anything ever tops Hellzone Grenade, does it?
Oh yeah, Hellzone Grenade is maybe just the one.
Or Light Grenade, just because the way that Chris Sabat says Light Grenade, as if his life fucking depends on it. It's like, Light Grenade! It's so good.
And speaking of Scream, Karl, we have to give a special shout out to our next patron, Split Scream.
You know what, Lucas? Let's go. Favourite example of Scream acting from a video game.
I mean, I can't not make it just the Night Trap Scream, which nearly got video games decimated.
It did indeed, yeah. But is that like your favourite one, or is that the one you think's most important?
I think a bit of both, because we've talked about it that many times, it's kind of now become one of my favourite.
Yes, and if people don't know, the basic story is that the lady I'm about to put a clip in of screams so realistically for what is otherwise a campy B-movie inspired video game that people legit thought it was a murder simulator and almost got video games killed. Impressive, right? That's a pretty good scream. And you know what, Lucas, to quote Metaton, screaming is against the rules. And if something is against the rules, who'll come in and like shoot you in the head for breaking them? Judge Dredd.
Just zero mercy.
My favourite Judge Dredd moment in a comic is where a guy steps out into the road and Judge Dredd just hits him. It's like, fuck it. You got in the way, that's breaking the law. And then as the guy's like trying to crawl back to the sidewalk, Judge Dredd walks up and shoots in the back of the head and then sends a fine to his family because him dying in the gutter constitutes littering.
I thought you were going to say obstruction of justice, but littering's even harsher.
It reminds me of one of my favourite moments in Borderlands 2 where you go to that town that like Handsome Jack runs.
Yes.
And you hear him over the tannoy giving like information about the town. And he says something along the lines of like, the punishment for everything here is death, including littering. I should also let you know that complaining about the law is considered to be verbal littering.
Did you know littering an opportunity is punishable by death? If not, you also ought to know complaining about Opportunity's laws is considered verbal littering.
God, we need to do an episode of Handsome Jack at some point.
I mean, to be fair, they've got about as much freedom of speech as we do in the UK right now.
They do indeed, yes. Also, speaking of scream acting, Handsome Jack, Damien Clark, is also the voice of Cell.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, he is. Do you like for Cell Max, for like Dragon Ball Superhero? They brought him back into the studio and just made him scream for 20 minutes and sent him home.
I don't want to think about Cell Max because that was just terrible. Awful part of that movie.
But thank you all for watching, and we'll see you all